Hey everyone. As distance runners, we're always trying to tell the difference between good pain and bad pain. I'll leave you to reach your own conclusions on what that says about us as people, but it's always good to know the difference between soreness and injury. Whether you want to learn how to tell if you really are injured, how to treat an injury, or how to come back after you have been injured, this video is for you. My guest today is a runner, a triathlete, a running coach, and a physiotherapist hailing from Melbourne, Australia. His Run Smarter podcast and innovative online consultations have helped literally hundreds of runners get back on the roads and trails. So stick around for my video interview with the one and only Brodie Sharpe. Here we go. Hey everybody, my guest today is Brodie Sharpe. He is a runner, he's a triathlete, a running coach, and a physiotherapist coming from Melbourne, Australia. I could go on and on with a more formal introduction, but I'm going to leave that to Brodie. The only thing I want to say, Brodie, before you jump in, is how happy I am that you are here. I've seen you and I've heard you plenty of times in the past, and you're always an absolute wealth of information. So thank you for being here today, sir.
It's my pleasure, Paul. Yeah, I'm really happy to be on.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So if you don't mind, please just give my audience just a brief introduction to you.
So, yeah, like you said, I'm from Melbourne, Australia. I am a physical therapist or a physiotherapist by trade, and I have just recently transitioned out of working in a private practice as an employee to owning my own physio business. It's a totally online business tailored for runners. Yeah, so really excited about that. So done that this year, as well as launched my new podcast, the Run Smarter podcast. And I have this mission to try and deliver like clarity and control to every runner. So I'm trying to break down a lot of misconceptions and myths that a lot of runners tend to hold that often don't serve them. And just trying to get the evidence out there in a way that every runner can understand. And so, yeah, just doing blogs and doing article reviews and doing podcast episodes and just trying to get a lot of useful information out there to runners. Myself as a runner, I'm just a recreational runner, a recreational triathlete. I just love exercising and love the sort of social aspect of running and trail running, that kind of thing. And yeah, just trying to keep fit when I can.
That's wonderful. Okay, so that's right up my alley. I mean, we were talking briefly, just so everybody knows, before we actually hit the record button for this particular video. And I think we have that very much in common, that we're trying to get facts out to runners so that they don't hurt themselves, so that they can thrive. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited to have you here today. So awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so just to kind of jump in, if you could give me just a little bit more about your athletic background, go back as far as you want to.
Yeah, so my athletic background, like I've only been running maybe 6 years or so, and it was, growing up, my whole family was a basketball family, so I grew up playing basketball, ended up like playing at quite a high level, like the state kind of level, and did that in the like open age, like men's competition for about 3-4 years or so. And then when traveling, I missed a season of basketball, came back, and then my sister was training for a half marathon and wanted me to train with her. And I was 6 months of traveling North America and was a bit sluggish, a little bit like out of shape, and just needed some sort of motivation. And so started running about 4 weeks in, loved it. I just definitely caught the bug. And
I was going to say,
loved the runner's high. Loved like having a goal to work towards. And yeah, so just loved that. Did the half marathon, ended up doing a full marathon. And then after doing the full, decided to change up the variety and then delved into the triathlon side of things. And yeah, so it's been really cool. I've had ups and downs. I've had so many injuries in the past, and that's kind of what sparked the the mission to try and find out everything it is about running injuries and injury prevention and trying to train smarter. So I started attending a lot of running courses, like physio courses, a lot of online courses from the best physio experts in the world that treat runners, and just trying to gain as much information as I could.
Wow, very cool, very cool. So, I mean, what are you doing today? Are you still competing, triathlete, or any kind of like road running or trail running?
Like usually what I'll do is, well, I don't have anything to train towards at the moment, but I do like to keep my body guessing a little bit. I do, if I train for a couple of races, I then like to do something a bit different. So the last couple of years I've participated in CrossFit, and the last 2 years I've been doing a trail run series that they have here in Australia, and just trying to keep my body guessing and just do something different. And so I love the variety, and I love trying to do something new. So I tend not to stick to any sort of commitments when it comes to races and stuff like that. But I just love the variety and just having a goal to work towards.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, do you keep to, even though there is so much variety in your training and in the kind of sports that you participate in, do you keep any kind of like bare minimum training schedule, even like for running? Like, is there a certain amount of miles season or anything like that you cover?
Like usually at the moment, I do like to run about 3 or 4 times a week. Generally speaking, I like to ride about twice a week, and just depending, and I'll do gym, like strength work, about 3 times a week. And depending on what I've trained myself for, I'll like manipulate those variables a little bit. So I might run a little bit longer or a little bit faster. I might do a little bit more bike riding. I might combine the two. My gym sessions will just depend on like what I need my body to adapt to. And but generally speaking, I'm working out probably about 6 days a week, and I'll deliberately have a complete rest day once a week. And always try and work on all those other health things like nutrition and sleep. And I'm always constantly trying to work on those.
Very smart. Very smart. It seems like you've come closer to mastering that balance than I have.
I try.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're making all the right moves, and that's what I'm still learning. But okay, so do you have any, looking past COVID, assuming that we're going to be past this pandemic in the next year, do you have any goals set, whether personal or, otherwise?
I would. Usually I want to try and get out to nature as much as I can. And so there was a couple of bike rides that I had on my to-do list to tick off, like out in nature, doing that kind of stuff. We do have a Great Ocean Road ride here, which I need to do, which is another story. But running wise, I love getting out in nature. So just trying to do as many trail runs as I can. I found a real big love for trail runs. And if I could do that, like around the nation or even some international ones, I'd love to get to New Zealand to do some trail runs there. That'd be unreal. They're definitely on my bucket list.
Wow, that's so cool. That's so cool. I'm just right there on the cusp of discovering trail runs. I think it was this last weekend I posted my first trail run video, and it's cool. So hard not to just run every run on the trails now.
Yeah.
It's so much fun, but the only way I'm going to maintain my speed is if I stick to the treadmill and the roads for at least some of my runs.
Yeah.
But that's awesome.
Something about it. Something about getting out in nature. There's something about getting that runner's high combined with nature. It's it's good.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, all right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I know you already mentioned a little bit about this, but what was the spark for you becoming more than a runner and triathlete and getting more into the physiotherapy side of things?
I think growing up, like I said, I was playing a lot of basketball. I was probably playing for 3 teams at one stage at a time, and was injured quite often. And I'd often go to a physical therapist, and just loved, like when I was injured, I loved the way they conducted themselves. I loved the information they had, how they would educate me through a certain injury, and just loved how they went about things. And I thought, it would be a good skill to have. It'd be a nice, like, to learn about the body, to learn about injuries, be a good skill for me to have, but also to educate to others. And so just continued following that passion. I was quite sporty, and then that kind of just sparks a bit more curiosity about the body and how the body works, and wanting to help others who are injured, wanting to help yourself, all that kind of thing. So I guess it was only natural that I'd sort of drift into that physical therapy profession.
Gotcha. Okay, so all right, I'm going to do a little reading here. I've got a bit of a long question here.
Yeah, hit me.
Sure. Yeah, I guess the gist of it is really when it comes to new runners, especially, people generally don't go out and seek out the help of a physiotherapist until after they are injured. They sort of, keep pushing, and the next thing they know, they've pushed a little too far. But I'd like to get your outlook, your strategies and your tactics that runners can use to prevent that injury in the first place.
Yeah, good question. And it's probably a topic that's worth like an entire episode. But you do say, yes, often people do see a physical therapist once they're injured. But I'd even go one step further, because a lot of runners do get injured and they still don't see a physical therapist. They run through their injury and they just like try and yeah. So what I've found is they don't seek a physical therapist once they're injured. They seek a physical therapist once their injury becomes so bad that they can't run, and then they go see them. And it's so tough for a health professional to get a runner who is at that stage to try and get them better, because they say, I've had plantar fasciitis. I've had it for 3 months now. It wasn't too bad, but I've been running through it the entire time. Now it's got to the point where I can't run for 500 meters without it flaring up. So can you get me better? Because I need to run in a week or two, and I need to be back to running. And it's a scenario I see so much. And it's like, so this is where the education comes into the side of things. And trying to, like, in an ideal world, it would be nice to have some preventative strategies. It'd be nice as soon as symptoms arise to get the right advice and be proactive with the first initial steps that you do. Therefore, you overcome this injury so much quicker. Mm-hmm. But in an ideal world, it's just not what human behavior is. I don't do that for when I need to get my car checked. I don't do it for when I need to go to the dentist. It's just human nature, so I can't blame anyone. But going back to the general topic of injury prevention, there are some very key fundamentals that we do need to know as runners. And first of all, it starts off with why injuries occur, why runners do get injured. And when it comes to the evidence and all the literature that's out there, they'll show that almost or more than 80% of running injuries are due to training errors. And it's due to the loads that you put the body through. It's due to your capacity that you have to tolerate those loads. And if you exceed that load, then you're going to start developing symptoms. And a lot of times people go to a health professional and they say, I have a sore knee, I have a sore hip, I have a sore foot. What's wrong with me? And a lot of times there's unhelpful things like, oh, it's because you've got flat feet, or it's because you're weak. It's because your hips are dropping. It's because there's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they label the injury due to having flat feet, or they give that label, or they give that belief, when really what you've done is you've used to running 20 miles a week, and the next week you've run 50 miles. That's all that has been done. You've exceeded the capacity. You've done too much too soon, and that's why the injury arises. We can do some things to settle down the symptoms, but really all it needs is to backtrace your steps and then have a better training plan in order to prevent that injury from occurring in the first place. And so to answer your question, what can we do so the injury doesn't arise to start with, is first, we need to establish what we're capable of doing. We need to establish where our adaptation zone is, and not to exceed that adaptation zone to into that injury kind of zone. Once you know where your adaptation zone is, just make sure that you're making small incremental steps, making sure that we're slowly building up those loads so we don't have those training errors.
10% rule comes in handy there.
Pardon?
I was just going to say the 10% rule comes in handy there.
Yeah.
Never increase your mileage by more than 10% a week.
Yep, that's a very conservative number, and it's hard. Like it can. There's a lot of variables. It could be 10% of overall weekly mileage. It could be, but then what does it do when it comes to speed? What does it do when it comes to terrain? Like sometimes people can run the same mileage, but all of a sudden they've done a different track where it requires a bit more hills, and they're going uphill and downhill beyond their capacity. So that's where other variables can come in. It's very, very tricky. It's very hard for a runner who doesn't have the insight or doesn't have the awareness to really hone in on those certain skills. But just know if there's an acute change, if there's a massive acute change, then it dramatically increases your risk of injury. And when you talk about the 10% rule, yes, people can get away. Most people, if you build up by 10%, you'll be totally fine. Some people, if you build up by 15%, you'll be totally fine. Once we get into 20%, most runners are starting to get into that kind of danger zone. But every individual is different. And so we need to tailor for that individual. And yeah, so that's number one. Number one, spikes in training in order to prevent injuries. There are certain other variables we can tweak in order for a recreational runner to minimize their risk of injury. One would be cadence. Like if their cadence is super, super low, that could be a risk. So people need to know what their running cadence is. I like to have a general range of where ideal is for an individual. And that's where the evidence comes in. It used to be like 180. 180 is the magic number. Stick to that, you'll be fine. It is a rough guideline for people. If someone's quite tall, if they've got quite long legs, their natural cadence is going to be naturally lower, and their ideal cadence is going to be naturally lower. Whereas someone's quite short and can turn their legs over quite quickly, their ideal cadence would be a little bit higher. So we do work within ranges with these sort of things, but in some instances, it won't make a difference for some. But those who have really low cadences, increasing that by 7.5 to 10% can be a game changer for them, and that can really reduce their risk of injury, becoming a more efficient runner. So they're the two big ones. They're the two big ones I look out for. We'll probably look at biomechanics and stuff a little bit further in the convo, depending where we want to take it. But let's just start with those two big foundation lessons and see where it takes us.
That's interesting. Now, I always looked at cadence as sort of a way to make sure that you're landing where you should land. Centered on around your body mass and all that kind of stuff. But I did not realize just how important that was to injury prevention too. I always looked at cadence as sort of a performance measure, much more than a injury prevention thing. That's very interesting.
Yeah, you're looking at a couple of things. Like if someone has a low cadence, what they're doing is they're moving up and down quite quickly. Their vertical oscillation, their amplitude is quite high. So they're slamming on the ground quite hard, or a little bit harder than what you're doing if you're isolating like this, if your vertical translation is a little bit lower. So what you're doing is you're reducing ground reaction forces. And reducing ground reaction forces, or reducing a peak in the reaction force, would be correlating to the load that goes through your body every single step. Yes, you're taking more steps, but the amplitude is less, and overall the risk of injury reduces. But then also, if someone does have a low cadence, they're often striding out very far. Their initial heel contact is really far forward of the body, and we don't really care about, at the moment, we don't care about how they're contacting the body. We don't care about if they're contacting with the heel or the flat foot or forefoot. That doesn't matter. What does matter is how far in front of the body it is. And someone who does have a really low cadence is reaching really far forward and creating a braking force. And so increasing your cadence brings that initial contact closer to underneath the body. So yes, it does increase efficiency and performance, but just those slight tweaks, just those two variables, does reduce risk of injury, because you're reducing braking forces and ground reaction force, which are two big factors when it comes to injury.
Gotcha. That's awesome. That alone, I think, is going to change a lot of people, make people Definitely. A lot more conscious of what they're doing as they get started. So the other things that come to mind, and by no means do I even pretend to be an expert, but The other two things that I think of when it comes to prevention is probably the amount of rest you're getting in between workouts and nutrition as sort of the big categories, the big umbrellas that you want to be thinking about.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that as well, because I did write that down. I just didn't touch on it. But when we're talking about injuries, we're talking about exceeding your adaptation, where every runner will have a certain, like when you train and put your body through a certain load, there's a spike in load somewhere, and where that load lands, does it land in your adaptation zone, your sweet spot? Because then if you do that enough times, the body will adapt and get stronger. Mm-hmm. Does it stay below your adaptation zone? Let's just say like a 10-minute walk, you're still putting load through your body, but sometimes that's not enough to trigger adaptation. Or are you exceeding that capacity? Say if you go for a 50-mile run right now, you might exceed that load capacity and get you into that injury zone. So there's kind of three zones that we talk about. Gotcha. When it comes to sleep, nutrition, and stress, that adaptation zone lowers or rises depending on how you, depending on your general health metrics. And that adaptation zone is fluid. It manipulates depending on certain things. So certain lifestyle situations, like the big ones I talk about are if you have like, let's just say you're new parents, you have your firstborn baby. One, it's a fair bit of stress, I could imagine. I don't have kids, but I could imagine. Two, you're not getting a lot of sleep because you have to be up at all hours of the night. And it could be a huge like strain, and it's just on your general health. And so what would happen in that scenario is your adaptation zone can drop. And so what was once hitting your adaptation zone, let's just say a 50-mile week, what was once hitting that adaptation zone is now exceeding that adaptation zone and getting above that. And then you get an injury and you're like, I don't know, I don't understand why. I've done the same amount of training. I've done the same amount of load. My mileage is exactly the same, but now I have this knee pain. Well, what else has happened? And it's either like they've moved house, they've got a promotion, they've lost their job, they're not sleeping well, they're not eating right, something along those lines. And it's just all those general health areas. Yeah, it's manipulating or affecting your body's tolerance to tolerate load. And yeah, that's when those injuries can arise. I call them the hidden dangers because it's something that a runner doesn't necessarily consider, and that health professionals don't necessarily consider, but can be a big one for someone. And that's where I'll dive into. If I see a runner where their injury doesn't make sense, I'll start to really hone in on those sort of specific questions to see if there's something there.
You know, it's funny, just to kind of illustrate that point, through my experiences, I've run, I'm going to get the number wrong, but let's just say 10 marathons at this point. And 2018 was an absolutely terrible year for me as far as, achieving what I wanted to achieve. Sure. I had upped the load. I was still operating under the misconception that the more miles I run in my training cycle, the better I'm going to perform at the race. And I had cranked my weekly running mileage up to 120 miles a week. I was used to about 105, so I was, pushing it. And it was only after I failed miserably at the race, just crashed and burned bad, that I went back and tried to do an assessment of where were the mistakes made, other than the obvious, just running too much. And one of the big lessons for me that I took out of it that jives with what you just said is, I think the big contributing factor there was because I went into the race feeling run down, terrible, and I was just going to push through. And I realized that the vast majority of that 18-week training cycle, I was running, I was carrying about 8 to 10 extra pounds around with me, just kind of dealing with it. And as I hit my taper, the last, month before the race, I decided, okay, now it's time to get the weight off.
And I was just like continuing to just, even though there was a taper involved, I was still hitting my body really, really hard and not giving it nutrition because I wanted the weight off. And
Gotcha.
so like one of the big things that I realized, and what is part of my pre-training cycle regimen at this point, is be at race weight before you start the cycle so that I can eat as much as I need to eat. I'm not worried about losing pounds. It's just about fueling my body properly.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. And it's good as a runner how after the race you've decided to self-reflect and see what's gone right, what's gone wrong, that kind of thing. It shows a lot of a lot of ambition to improve, which a lot of runners don't do. So well done for that. But you're right. If someone does want to increase their speed or perform better for a half marathon or marathon, generally the guidance is to increase your mileage. And I recommend that for a lot of people as well. But on the caveat of that, like if you want to increase your mileage, you need to really enhance your recovery as well. Those who work really hard and those who put their body through a lot, they need to focus so much on recovery. That's good quality sleep, that's good nutrition, that's, looking after your mental health, that kind of thing. And make sure that if you do have your down days and if you do feel like you just don't want to train, it's kind of like listen to the body sort of thing. So yes, if you want to improve your marathon time and you're running 50 miles a week, you probably want to very, very gradually build it up to doing 100 miles a week, as long as you don't exceed the body's capacity to adapt. And you will perform better, but you do need to highly prioritize recovery because you're asking a lot of your body. There's a lot of demand. And I don't know if I can reach this. I've got this Aura ring that I have, which I wear every night before I sleep. And it measures all my my sleep metrics. It gives me a performance score when I wake up. It gives me a sleep score when I wake up. And it just tells me what my heart rate was doing, what my heart rate variability was doing, what my body temperature and stuff like that was throughout the night, and how my body's recovered. And so that's given me a lot of good health metrics. And a lot of times I've decided to do a long run and my body has said otherwise. They're like, you didn't recover well. You had a lot of sugar yesterday. You've worked out quite hard the last couple of days. You've done X, Y, Z. Now's not the day. Today's your recovery day. So I'm like, okay. And then other days will be the opposite.
Gotcha. See, what you just said is that kind of self-awareness is just amazing, and I've started trying to adapt that. And in all truth, the only reason I bring this up is because I think this really has the potential to help other people who are out there kind of pushing their limits. Since I'm not really in a training cycle right now, I find it very easy to follow the advice that you just gave. For example, today I was supposed to go out and do my, it was supposed to be tempo day, and I just knew when I got up today that I wasn't ready. So it's my tempo day. I put it off. It's going to be tomorrow. I'm hoping that I can get some decent sleep tonight and eat a healthy dinner, and I'll have at it tomorrow. And that's all fine and good. I feel like I've got that leeway. I can move my days around a little bit because I'm not really in the middle of a training cycle. But I don't know, quirk of my personality maybe, but like the day one of my training cycle, I'll usually do either a 12-week or an 18-week, depending on, what my race schedule looks like. But the second I have my schedule in front of me of what I'm supposed to do on a given day, making the smart move goes out the window. And I feel like, no, the schedule says I'm supposed to do this today, so I'm doing it today. And I'll push myself into the ground. I'll dig a hole. Yeah. And it's so great to talk to somebody like you it's so great to hear from a professional, somebody who's studied this and can say, well, no, that's a dumb idea, and stop doing that. I think what I need more than anything.
A couple of things. Like if you find yourself doing that, usually within a training cycle, if you have a strict regimen, I'd probably give you a couple of weeks of leeway anyway. Probably have within there a couple of weeks where you can kind of manipulate the numbers around and have a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more laxity to, if you do have these down days or days where you don't feel like doing a hard session, then that's fine. You can also like swap days in and out, and like you said, like you were just doing, like you can swap a tempo day to a couple of days to when you're feeling better and you're getting better sleep. But it's very tough to make training decisions, even or smart decisions, even outside of a training cycle. And I've just recorded or documented my journey. I've overcome 6 years of tendinopathy just recently during COVID lockdown. I'm like, okay, I've been running and I've been actually performing quite well, but I've always had this tendon issue. And because I could still perform, I'm like, let me just really overcome this. Let me really just get on top of this. And I had to try and make all these smart training decisions. And even myself, like, it was tough for me. And there was one long run that I had to do, and it was the night before like bars here had first opened. And so we went back out, we had a couple of beers. I didn't get a lot of sleep, and I woke up and my health score was just terrible. I didn't get any sleep. My heart rate stayed elevated the entire night. And the decision to not go for that long run and do it a couple of days later was probably the hardest decision out of this whole recovery, because that's what runners do. They want to stick to that plan. They want to follow that plan, but it is making those smarter decisions, which makes you a better runner and reduces your risk of injury. But it's very hard to execute. I do say often with the podcasts that I do and the courses that I make, it's one thing to have all the information. It's one thing to know all the smart decisions, and it's another to execute. And it's even like, it demands more of you to actually execute on that information. So it's very tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's one of those things. It's just a matter of experience and wisdom. And after 9 years of running, I'm just dipping my toe into that wisdom pool now.
Yep.
And again, that's why I'm so thankful that you're here. For me, it takes a lot to get through this thing, and I think words from a professional like you go a long way to changing my mindset.
I was saying this a lot, like even the podcast, I was on another podcast before this, and I was saying runners are stubborn. They're the most stubborn individuals, and that's why it's so tough as a physio working with runners, because you say that you tell them to do one thing, you'll educate them, you give them all these things, and they say, great. I'm like, yeah, they're really on top of it. And then they're just so stubborn, they'll go and do something they're not supposed to, or they'll stick to some other unhelpful strategy, and you're just like, and it's very hard to work with, but it's the challenge that I'm up for.
Yeah. I appreciate it. I will do my best to spread that gospel.
Good. Very good.
Cool. So moving on just a little bit here. What advice can you give? Hopefully this is just a quick little question answer, but how does a runner, especially like a newer runner, they're just starting to get into the swing of things, and they get out there and they've been at it for, say, a couple of weeks, and there's discomfort. They notice discomfort. How should a new runner assess discomfort and try to know the difference between healthy discomfort and you're about to injure yourself?
Yeah, good question. It can be a quick answer. It can also be a long-winded answer. I'll give a couple of things. So definitely for a new runner, you're looking at someone who is putting something through their body. Like a lot of people can resonate with if they go to the gym and they do an exercise they haven't done before, or they haven't done an exercise in a long time. The next day they're feeling it. The next day their whole entire muscles like really sore. And this is what we call DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. And it's just what the body's doing is been put through something new. And so the muscles tend to break down, which is very healthy. And what happens during that breakdown, it recovers and gets stronger because of it. And during that recovery phase, you do feel sore. That's very normal. It's very healthy. And it's actually required for you to get stronger. So when you have this scenario of a new runner or someone who's just starting out, they're doing the same thing. So they're hitting the pavement, they're running, they're putting their calves through a lot, they're putting their quads through a lot, their hips are working beyond what they're used to doing. So there might be some muscle soreness the following day, and it's okay. I guess what your question is, what's good pain, what's bad pain? What is something that to be like, oh, I'm safe, this is just the body getting stronger, compared to this is actually an injury developing because you've exceeded your capacity to adapt and it's starting to lead to an injury. And there are certain characteristics that can differentiate the two.
Okay.
If we look at good pain and we look at this DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, one, the location. So the location is usually quite widespread, and it's always in the area of the muscle. So if most people, like if they know their anatomy, it's not in the joint, it's not like focused on one tendon, it's usually quite wide, it's usually the muscle itself, and it's usually sore to like stretch out or like contract, like that muscle kind of soreness. So there's the location of it. Two, it's like, when does the pain come on? So if those symptoms came on the following day, like a 24 to 48 hour response, then that's another sign that it's that DOMS, that good pain. And three, how long does it last for? Because usually DOMS would last for 2 days, 3 days. If it's really severe, like I've had some big gym workouts where I've had DOMS for maybe 4 days max. But if you follow those, then we usually tend to think it's more of that good pain. On the other side of things, if we flip that equation, one, if the location is like really honed in, really isolated, like you can point a finger to where it's sore, that structure that's sore, usually that's a tendon or a joint, or maybe, heaven forbid, like a muscle tear or something like that. That's often a sign that's not helpful. Two, when does the pain come on? Sometimes if it's like a tendon, it can come on 24 hours afterwards. But if pain comes on during a run or straight after a run, there tend to be bad signs. And how long does it last for? Like generally, does it get better? Generally, does it, if you do have a bad pain that hangs around for a week, we tend to need to get that looked at. And with DOMS, it usually tends to get better. Like day 2 will be quite bad. Day 3, not so bad. Day 4, we're good. Whereas with the tending to the bad kind of pain, it lingers. Sometimes it can get a bit better, but by the next week it's back up again, and it just doesn't generally resolve. And so focus on those 3 characteristics.
Gotcha. Yeah. My running journal is probably just a laundry list of me doing all the wrong things.
Maybe.
Less and
we
less
learn from our
often.
mistakes.
Exactly. Less and less often as the years go by, but nonetheless, I'm nowhere near as aware as I should be. So it's just great to hear this directly from an expert.
Yeah.
I guess the next thing I really want to go after is once a runner has determined, yeah, this is definitely an injury. I've definitely hurt myself. I've laid off for a couple of days, and maybe they went out for another half mile and they had to walk it on in. It's definitely an injury. I know there's so many different levels of injury, but when is it something? Is there an easy cutoff point where you can say, well, just lay off for a couple of days and it'll solve itself? Or when do you want to go to a physical therapist and start looking at some form of regimen to get you back to health?
Yeah, because we often do get injuries that need physical therapist or need a guidance, but they often resolve on their own. So maybe there's just a really mild thing that needs to be tweaked, and then you're okay. What I like to explain to patients is, let's just say you have Achilles soreness. Let's just say you've overloaded your Achilles. The next day it's really grumpy and really aggravated, and you do need to see a physical therapist for the right guidance. My advice for people is just to observe it over a week. If it tends to get better, let's just say after a week, if you're 70% better, I'd say, okay, maybe you don't need to see a physio. Maybe let's continue to see what is in the next week. If the next week it is 99% better, okay, maybe we don't need to see a physio. Let's continue into the third week. And then by then, usually it's 100% better. That's okay. I'm more than happy for that to happen, even though it's a bad kind of injury. What I would recommend, but a lot of times people, it gets sore after a week, it's maybe 30% better. And then by week 2, it's still about 30% better. Like that progression is like plateauing, and it's not tending towards that 100% better. Sometimes it could be within a week, it's 80% better. And then in the second week, there was another little flare up, and then, it's back to, 50% better. And then it might be 90% better. Now it's back to 50% better. If that happens and that fluctuates, then definitely see a physio, because the longer you've had this injury for, the harder it is to get rid of. And that's one particular focus where people are like, yeah, but it was getting better, but now it's not, but then it was getting better. And it can be quite complicated in terms of what people do. And then you just have the injuries that don't get better. If not, they get worse. And by the end of week 1 or the end of week 2, it's worse than what it was when it started. That's when you definitely need to see someone, because if it just continues to get worse, then it's harder to get rid of. So I would say just pay attention to symptoms. Generally, if it's like a tendon issue or like any other sort of tendinopathy, complete rest is not often helpful. So it's good to have the right advice on what you can do to still stay proactive, because complete rest often makes structures weaker, which makes it harder to get to overcome. So have the right guidance to back off of that. But if it's tending to get better, then see how it goes. If it's not tending to get better, then seek help.
Gotcha. That's a very interesting point you just brought up there about complete rest not necessarily being the way to go.
Yep. Rest not always best is one of my the titles of one of my podcast episodes.
Oh wow, yeah, okay, yeah. When we get to the end of this, we've got so much more to talk about, but I'll definitely be sharing links to all of your resources in the show notes, et cetera, because this is fascinating. I mean, I think people are just going to learn an absolute ton from this. Already, I've already picked up so many tips. But
I could talk about this all day, so if we want to delve into that, then we can.
Yeah,
maybe
I would love to hear more about that. I really would. How do you I guess you call that active rehab? I don't know.
I think people need to understand the concept, what I've dubbed the pain, rest, weakness, downward spiral. And it is, once someone is injured, you've exceeded the capacity. If we talk about those 3 zones, like we talked about last time, that adaptation zone, that really nice sweet spot, and then that injury zone, what happens when you get injured is, if we use that example of the Achilles, if this was your Achilles sweet spot, as soon as you get injured and it flares up, those structures to tolerate load actually drops. So your adaptation zone gets to here. So what was previously a sweet spot is now lower. And what active rehab would do is like, okay, let's go back to here, let's train here. And then over time it climbs back up, because the more often you stay in that adaptation zone, the body's going to adapt and it's going to get stronger. But what people do is they go back to where they were currently at, and that flares it up again and it gets weaker. And then they say, okay, maybe I'm not ready for running. So let me have a week off. Maybe it'll be better in a week. What you're doing is completely resting that tendon. So then it goes further down because it gets weaker. And then they try and go back the next week, and they say, and it flares up again, maybe 2 weeks off. Maybe I'm just not ready yet. And then they have 2 weeks off. It gets weaker. And what you're seeing is the structure and the ability for that structure to tolerate load is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And you're resting as it gets weaker and weaker. And so I call this the pain, rest, weakness, downward spiral, because that's exactly what it's doing. It's being flared up. The structures are getting sensitive. Its ability to tolerate load is dropping and dropping and dropping. And what you're doing to combat that is rest. And that's when I get a person into my clinic that's had it for months and months. Plantar fasciitis is a huge one with this pain, rest, weakness, downward spiral, where now they can't walk for 30 minutes, or they can't walk in bare feet for 30 minutes. And because they're so far down that downward spiral, and it's so hard to work your way back up the further down you are, where, to your point before, this active rehab, if you were to say, okay, you can't tolerate a 2-mile run right now, but what we can do is some strengthening exercises that doesn't flare you up, and that at least starts triggering some adaptation to bring you back up. And maybe we can start with a jog for 1 minute, walk for 1 minute. Maybe if we do that 10 times, let's see if you can tolerate that. And if you can tolerate that, fantastic. We're still activating those structures. It's reducing sensitivity. We're not completely resting. And all that pain, rest, weakness, we're combating all of those with active rehab. So we're not getting weak, we're not resting, and the sensitivity of those structures starts diminishing. So then we start working our way back up.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense when you when you hear it. Yeah, that's great. It's just...
And that's when it becomes a bit of an art as well, because you need, as a physio and as the runner, you need to establish, okay, where's your starting point now? Like if I have someone with plantar fasciitis that's had it for 12 months and they can't stand on their feet for an hour at work, and then that flares them up, it's like, where's our starting point? Where can we start? That's where it becomes a bit of an art. And then once they can tolerate a certain load, okay, where do we go to next? And if someone's had Achilles flare up for 2 weeks and they're particularly flared up, okay, where's our starting point for them? It's all about a bit of trial and error, but it does pay to have a bit of expertise to know where to start and where to level yourself up. Because it can be tricky for a runner.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially when your mind is clouded with, I just got to get back to it. I got to get back to it, which is my personality, unfortunately. So,
yeah.
But okay, great. So I guess I want to kind of start attacking the tail end of this hill. We've talked about prevention, just trying to stay strong, the factors that can fluctuate, and we've talked a little bit about figuring out whether injury is something you can treat yourself or you need to seek professional help. After somebody's been treated and they've got the green light to sort of have at it again, even if it's with limited capacity. I'm very curious about the mental side of things. Even if you have physically reached a point where you are capable of taking up running or whatever the sport may be, how do you get past that stage of not getting your mental confidence, getting to where you're willing to jump in again, like when you're not sort of like just taking it too easy on yourself because of fear of hurting yourself again?
Yeah. There could be a couple of things. One, you could be physically better, or maybe due to like strength tests, you look like you're better, but you just don't feel confident enough to return back to what you were at. One thing to see if you are physically better is to have someone that does the right tests for you, because I often have a runner come in and if we continue with this Achilles sort of stuff, if they're like, look, I feel better, I'm pain-free, but I just don't feel like I'm ready. You do a couple of tests with them, you get them to do, say, some hopping, and they're shocking. They just don't have the same recoil, they don't have the same strength, they don't have the same power as the unaffected side. And day-to-day stuff, like even just jogging, there's no symptoms that have like arose, but you do a simple hopping test and they really struggle, and you say, well, running is a series of hopping on one side to the other. If you can't do that on one side, then you're unconsciously going to not feel ready, because you're not as robust. You're not as, the physical confidence isn't there. So that's one thing, making sure that we're ticking all our boxes, and we're even the underlying kind of grumbly sort of stuff where we're staying on top of and we're addressing those. That can help their confidence in themselves, and then be like, oh, let's see how you're hopping one side to the other. If they're really strong and compared to the other side, they're pretty much unmatched or exactly the same. Be like, great, fantastic, let's get back into it. And that's where it comes to a step-by-step reintroduction, you could call it. And if they're not confident because they're scared that their Achilles is going to flare up again. Let's start small. Let's just start with a 1 minute walk or a 5 minute walk followed by a 1K run or a 1 minute run, or that's where we start with just manipulating numbers. And often with my really chronic plantar fasciitis people, they're really scared of their plantar fascia flaring up. And I said, well, how do you go walking for half an hour? Oh yeah, walking for half an hour is fine. Okay, how about if we walk for that half an hour and then we jog for 15 seconds? You reckon you can do that? And then they say, oh yeah, I could probably do that. All right, well, let's start there and then build our way back up. And that's a very extreme example. But if we have a runner who wants to jog for half a mile and then walk for half a mile and do that 5 times to help instill a little bit of confidence, and then the next day they're not flared up and they're feeling totally fine. They're like, actually, I tolerated that really well. Fantastic. Let's do a little bit more next time. And you're slowly building your way back up and you're building your confidence along the way. That's the second thing I'd do. The third thing when it comes to the mental side of things is make sure that they don't have any unhelpful misconceptions or myths about why they're getting injured or what caused the injury in the first place. And that can obviously be really detrimental to someone's capacity or someone's confidence, because often I get someone that thinks that they get plantar fasciitis because their feet are collapsing, because they've got no strength in their feet, because they need that support there, which is often untrue. People have osteoarthritis and they're scared that's going to flare up because they've got bone on bone rubbing, which is a total misconception, which is another topic we can talk about. Unhelpful things. They think they get injured because they need to stretch more, or they think they're getting injured because they're way too weak, or often these things aren't serving them, and the cause of their injuries are actually because of their training loads or their capacities, and it's not due to their running biomechanics. It's not due to their shoes. It's not due to them being too stiff. It's so making sure that we're on the same page in terms of their beliefs, making sure we're on the same page into what's causing the injury or interpreting their symptoms. And as long as they have that right education, then that instills a lot of confidence in themselves as well. And it's very empowering to know that information, which is why I'm doing the podcast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's wonderful. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. If you're able to test your capabilities in a very regimented way, in a very systematic
and something that's quite
way.
Safe, because you could say if someone's got a really grumbly Achilles tendon, I wouldn't get them doing any hopping. I'd make sure we're in a really safe zone where we're doing, say, calf raises, or if someone has plantar fasciitis, we need to test it. Well, let's just start with calf raises. Let's do something well within your safe zone. We're not trying to challenge the tendon to see if they can withstand a certain load with like a quick, powerful sort of thing. We're just working in a really safe zone and then just working our way out from there. And that helps instill a lot of confidence. And a lot of times if I ask someone to hop and they stare at me being like, you want me to do what? And you can actually see in their face, they're scared to hop on one side. You shouldn't be running, definitely shouldn't be running, but let's work our way back up to the point where you are confident to start hopping.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so it makes perfect sense. Just stage it out from small to big, and if you're all right all the way through all these tests, it'll definitely build your confidence. So that's great. That's great. I mean, these are the kind of things that a professional will bring.
Sometimes I'm here just to say what makes sense a lot of the times, but executing it is a very different story.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's where I fall short constantly. I'm just always
We've all been victims to it. Trust me.
Okay. Yeah. I wanted to take an opportunity. The more I learned about you, I was really intrigued by something that you do that is really quite innovative. These days, due to COVID-19, which is hopefully a little passing phase here in the reality of the world, it's a lot more commonplace these days for people to do online sessions with their doctors, of all different kinds. But you are very innovative because you are doing this with your physical therapy practice for quite a while now. And I think it's wonderful because it makes your services available to such a wider range of athletes. And I was hoping maybe you could talk about where that came from and how it's doing for you.
Yeah, I do like to say that I was doing telehealth before it was cool. It was probably, I think, December or maybe November last year is when I saw my first paid client with my online course. And yeah, so it's pretty much like an online physiotherapy clinic. How that looks is if someone wants physio from me, if they want my services, they go online, they book a consult like just as anyone would online. And once they've booked a session, they're emailed a couple of questionnaires so I get to know more about them. And it's what we've talked about today. Yes, it is talking about their injury, their history, any history of injuries, what their training has been like, any spikes in training, but also clarifying some health questions, some sleep and nutrition, that kind of stuff, just general health questions. Based on what you want to get out of physio, if you are injured, you are also prompted to do some tests at home. It might be some hopping, it might be some calf raises, it might be squats, and just document if there's any pain, if there's any weakness, if there's any differences from right to left. That way, as you do that, and you're just prompted the whole way, it's just me instructing you what to do. And I'm just gaining more information before we jump on a call like this. And it is a video consult. So I use different software to Zoom, but essentially it's the same. And so we jump on, I go through more clarifying questions. I go through some tests that you might need to do just during our video consult. And we establish a diagnosis, very easy. I'd say about 90% of the clients I see, I can accurately diagnose. And I'm pretty, I'd say I'm about 80% accurate before they even jump on the call, just based on asking the right questions. And then once we've established a good diagnosis, then we provide the right education. Definitely educate them is the biggest thing that we do, and the biggest impact that we can have. But through online, we can give you strengthening programs, give you running programs, can give you the right exercise, the right stretches to do. And as after our consult, what happens is we have like follow-up sessions. We can have unlimited follow-up sessions. So the business model at the moment is you can sign up for 1 week of physio, or you can sign up for 1 month of physio. And I'm just like at your beck and call the entire time. So we jump on the video consult, everything gets done. But then after that, if we need to update your exercises, if your symptoms change, if we try something and it's not, and it increases symptoms slightly, we need to manipulate the dosages a little bit. I'm just at your beck and call to adjust those throughout the time frame that you've purchased for. And we do that via email. We do that via calls. We either jump on another video call or just text message, that sort of thing, whatever medium is best suited for you. And so that's what it looks like. And usually what the type of clients that are gravitated towards me are the ones that have had an injury for a very long period of time. And it's kind of like, oh, let me just try this. And they've often seen 4 physical therapists, they've seen 1 chiro, they've seen 1 sports specialist, and they're still not getting better. And then they say, okay, this is a last ditch effort, I guess, to try online. And then they see the benefits, and we're getting really good results.
I would imagine. I mean, just the whole idea of somebody being able to access your expertise from the comfort of their own home has got to be a lot less stressful for the patient. And I know for me, it would definitely leave me feeling less stressed and more open to the therapies that you recommend.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I do have the added benefit with it being online that I can reach a greater population as well. And it's not just within my immediate area. Last week I saw someone in Scotland, and it's helped me serve my mission to try and bring clarity and control to every runner. It's just helping me reach more people, which it's just another added benefit.
Yeah, it's absolutely great. I mean, someone like you who's with, not only the positive attitude, but the incredible knowledge that you have. I just hope that I know for a fact that there are a lot of people in my subscriber base that could really benefit from the knowledge and your capabilities. So I can't wait for them to see this.
Yeah, well, that's why I love doing this. I love doing these interviews. I've just got off one. I'm on this one now, and I think I've got one tomorrow. I can do this all day. It's just like,
it makes me so happy that you're that busy. That's great. That's absolutely wonderful. Let me see here. Yeah, just to kind of, I'm very curious. The innovation that you brought to therapy, we just touched on, but in a bigger picture, when it comes to your social media presence and your podcast, the Run Smarter podcast, what prompted that? Where did all this come from? Like, I assume you started down the road of being a physiotherapist first, and then that grew from it. But yeah, what was the spark from that?
It was upon self-reflection. Once I became, like, I was a physio first before I was a runner. And what happened was I was going about my usual physio career. As soon as I became a runner and then I started seeing runners in my clinic, I just had this heightened passion. I just wanted to try and get them back. I was talking about their running shoes. What's your cadence? What are you training for at the moment? What are you doing? And they would walk away, having my best self, because I'd try my best just to try and get them back, and it'd bring out a better version of me and a heightened level of passion. Every time I saw a runner, they would walk out feeling good. I would feel like a more energy the entire day as soon as I saw a runner in my clinic. And so that self-reflection was like, I need to spend more time around this sort of thing. I need to spend more time around this population because it's bringing out my better self. And that's where it came. And so that's where I started the podcast. It's where I started the online clinic tailored for runners. It's where I started all the social media posts, and that kind of just evolved into this mission. As soon as I started seeing a lot of runners online that would have the same myths and misconceptions and the same like issues that are popping up, and I kept illustrating the same concepts over and over and over again, is where I started to be like, okay, there's something to this. Every runner needs to know this sort of stuff. Let me put it out there. Let me do a podcast. Let me do like a online course. Let me do these sort of things in order to any runner can just have straight away. So it's just not me explaining it every single time. It's an actual housed, and anyone that has a certain particular issue, I can refer back to episode 15 or like address all these ideal, like fundamental principles that every runner should know. They can just be directed to that and they can learn. And then if they have any questions after that, then I'm obviously there to by their side, just if they have any additional advice that they need.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Having that backlog of past podcasts and posts on social media, that's just wonderful. It's just a great way to get people the initial set of information. And then if they want to dig deeper, it's a great way to drive them to your practice. And that's just wonderful. Okay. So just to explore your podcast a little bit more, what kind of things do you have planned for the near future?
Good question. So my podcast has about 60 episodes at the moment. The first 20 or so were like really foundation principles that every runner needs to know. So every runner needs to go through those first 20. But then I start honing in on a couple of like injury specific stuff or really tailored stuff for a certain population. If they do have plantar fasciitis, then they can be referred to this. So I've started establishing those. Any sort of injury that I haven't covered yet, I'll yet to do an episode. Like I think next week I'll do one on repetitive calf strains, and just like the things that come up. But moving forward, I'm trying to grasp like experts and let's just say yesterday I had a podcast interview with Chris Brammer, who is a researcher. He's a physio in the UK, but also a researcher on biomechanics, how like running biomechanics can influence injury and performance. And so I had him on last night, chatted to him. I had Simon Barthold, who is a world-renowned podiatrist, and got him on to discuss things around the carbon fiber plate shoes and all that sort of stuff, and whether that has much influence for a recreational runner. So it's me trying to expand on my knowledge, me trying to interview those in other disciplines. Like I've had a couple of chiros on, I've had a couple of podiatrists on, just so I can gain as much information as I need as well, because I'm still learning. And
so I appreciate you doing that and taking us all along for the ride, because any runner who's been at it long enough, we're not the only ones who are obsessed with this stuff. There are so many people that I speak with on a regular basis online that just love consuming this information. And I really appreciate you going out and not only providing your expertise, but going out and seeking the expertise of others and presenting it to everyone. It's just amazing.
It's kind of like people get this confirmation bias, or like they get physio or physical therapist only information, and then they just want to disregard everything that comes from a chiro, or they want to disregard everything that comes from a podiatrist. And it's a very limited way of growing. And it's one thing to try and just take everyone's advice on board. There definitely are a certain type of person that are very regimented or very like rigid with their beliefs that I don't have on, because I can instantly say that they want to push something, that have some hidden agenda and they don't want to listen to any other bits of advice. You can quickly disregard them. But the ones who are evidence-based, the ones who do want to know as much information and they want to learn from everyone, you can quickly pick them out, and I get them on the podcast, and they have different views to myself. And if they are really evidence-based, they want to just challenge their own thinking and they want to have healthy debates about certain topics, then that's where we all grow. And so that's where the podcast has been a really good medium for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I find the same thing even here. Though my YouTube channel is very small right now, it is showing signs of growth, thank goodness. And
quality does that, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I like to think so anyway. I mean, with guests like you, I think the quality goes way up. But I appreciate your time. I do want to ask something. It seems a little silly after your last answer, but I ask this of everyone. Do you have a favorite piece of advice that you'd like to pass on to runners? Just something general that they can keep in mind that will lead them in the right direction.
I would say, like we talked about before, be careful of training loads. And if you do have an injury, have a reflect back on the past couple of weeks to see if there was a massive change in what you had done, whether it be speed or terrain or a rapid change in shoes or something like that. And don't lead to any like misbeliefs of what caused that injury apart from training errors, because often people can create, I've got this knee pain because I have poor biomechanics, or I've got this injury because my feet are collapsing in or something like that. Or they could blame the shoe when really all they've done is increase their running mileage, and that's all they needed to change in the first place. And then that's the cause and that's the solution. But it can instill a lot of beliefs in people if they have these, if they're misinformed, if they have poor information, if they go and quickly Google something or quickly jump on a Facebook group and say, I have knee pain, what do you think it is? And they develop all these knee myths and misconceptions. So my one takeaway would be make sure we're paying attention to your training loads. Make sure if an injury arises, we're making sure that we're identifying if there was a spike in load, or maybe it was a decrease in those hidden dangers, maybe sleep, stress, nutrition, and just make those adjustments and continue thriving as a runner. Try not to instill any of those myths and misconceptions that are out there.
Gotcha. Wonderful advice. Wonderful advice. Last thing I want to ask of you is please provide me with the best ways that people can get in touch with you. I know there are going to be a lot of questions and a lot of people seeking your advice after seeing this. So, like I said earlier, I will provide that in the show notes in the description below. But if you could just kind of give people, that information, that'd be wonderful.
Yep. So first you can be directed to the podcast. So the Run Smarter podcast, you can just search that wherever you find your podcasts. that has, like you said, the back catalog of everything if you need to know more information. I am very active on Instagram, so Brodie.Sharpe is my name and also the handle. So you can go there. I post a lot of exercises and articles and blogs and everything like that. You can go there. You can email me if you have any questions. So I've got my email is brody@runsmarter.online, which you could probably just provide on there. And if you're curious about any physio or online physio, my website is breakthroughrunning.physio, and I guess you could add that link as well. But
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm more than happy if anyone wants to reach out, have any questions. If you want to jump on the podcast and learn some stuff, then highly encouraged.
That's wonderful. Thank you, sir. This has been just a huge learning journey, just tons of great information packed into a very short space. As I said to you before we even hit the record button on this, there's a ton of other things that I'd like to discuss with you in the future. And I will hit you up, and I hope we can do this again very soon. But I wanted to keep this one very focused on injury because I think that's going to help a lot of especially newer runners. And I'd like to expand out in the future and talk a little bit more about excelling and pushing the limits safely. So I'm really looking forward to that. And,
I'd love that. I'd love to be back on. I love doing this sort of stuff. And not only am I helping you, but you're helping me create an outlet because I love talking about this. So the more you can get me on, the more I can provide that outlet and the better I feel. So love to be back on.
Well, I appreciate your openness to that possibility. I'm going to take you up on it. So beware. Thank you very much. It's been great, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you again in the near future. All the best to you, sir, and we'll speak again soon.
You're very welcome, Paul. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, sir.